What if the most radical thing you ever do is stop explaining? Not to silence anyone else, but to finally stop silencing yourself. We live in a world that demands a justification for every move you make. Why you didn't answer the call. Why you changed careers. Why you ended a relationship. Why you chose solitude over socializing. Why you walked away from something everyone else was applauding. But no one tells you how heavy that pressure becomes. No one tells you how explaining yourself begins to feel like slowly unraveling a thread that no one else was even watching closely. Just pulling, until you don't recognize the original fabric anymore. You become a ghost in your own life, haunted not by what people say, but by what you feel forced to say back. You become more translator than soul, constantly converting your feelings into something others can interpret, digest, accept, until one day, you stop. Not because you're angry, but because you finally get it. No matter how carefully you speak, no matter how patiently you try to show your heart, no matter how raw or honest or broken or clear you are, people will still hear what they are ready to hear. They will filter you through their wounds. They will label you through their fears. They will summarize you in their language, not yours. And that will never be your responsibility. You don't owe the world a performance. You don't owe your past an explanation. You don't owe your trauma a sequel. You don't owe your friends constant validation. You don't owe your family a version of you they can live with. You don't owe strangers an identity that fits their assumptions. You don't owe anyone the softening of your truth. But the moment you stop explaining, everything around you shifts. You begin to feel an unexpected kind of quiet, a silence that is not absence but presence. You begin to hear your own voice again, not the edited version you rehearsed for others, but the raw, real one that's been whispering beneath all your compromises. You realize that people never really wanted you. They wanted the version of you that fit neatly into their expectations. The reliable one. The agreeable one. The easy-to-categorize one. The one who could be counted on to reflect back their sense of self, not challenge it. And when you stop doing that, they panic. Not because you've wronged them, but because your refusal to play your role forces them to reevaluate the entire script they were writing for both of you. They feel betrayed by your authenticity. They feel abandoned by your freedom. They feel rejected by your refusal to contort yourself. But what they don't understand, and maybe never will, is that you didn't leave them. You returned to yourself. You came home. And that kind of return? It shakes everything. Because your silence becomes a mirror. Not just any mirror, but a sacred one. One that no longer distorts or flatters. One that simply reflects. Cleanly, powerfully, unforgivingly. And most people are not ready to see themselves in that kind of mirror. So they lash out. They call you selfish, cold, detached, difficult, unavailable, dramatic, sensitive, closed off. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer convenient for me. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer controllable. And that scares them. Because they didn't love you. They loved their ability to define you. They didn't see you. They saw who they needed you to be. And when you stop explaining, they are left with nothing but their projections, and that's not a reflection they enjoy facing. But here's the truth. You don't exist to be understood. You exist to be whole. You exist to be real. You exist to live in alignment with your own soul, not to fit into someone else's narrative. And yes, there is grief in that. There's a kind of loneliness that comes with releasing roles you've held for years, identities you've clung to just to feel safe, to feel useful, to feel wanted. But eventually that loneliness fades, and in its place, something astonishing arrives. Sovereignty. A sense of groundedness that no opinion can shake. A peace that doesn't need applause. A confidence that doesn't beg for permission. And it all starts with one sacred decision. To stop explaining. Stop explaining why you need rest. Stop explaining why you set that boundary. Stop explaining why you're no longer available for the same old drama. Stop explaining why you don't show up the way you used to. You have the right to evolve. You have the right to outgrow versions of yourself. You have the right to listen to your body, to your intuition, to your spirit, and to move accordingly. And if others cannot meet you there, let them stay where they are. Because here's the deepest truth of all. When you stop explaining, you start embodying. You stop being a story for others to consume, and you become a force. You become the kind of person who doesn't need to say much, because their energy says it all. You become the kind of presence that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't shrink. And you become something incredibly rare in today's world, unapologetically whole. There's something peculiar that happens when you choose wholeness over approval. At first, there's a stillness, a deep, echoing silence. You no longer fill the air with explanations, apologies, or softeners. And in that quiet, something begins to rise, not externally, but internally. You start to notice just how much noise you were carrying, how much energy you spent clarifying what didn't need to be defended, how often you distorted your boundaries so someone else wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But now, that noise has stopped, and what's left is the sound of your own voice returning home. It doesn't sound how you remembered it. It's deeper, slower, wiser. It's no longer trying to please anyone. It's simply being. You begin to realize that many of your relationships weren't based on connection. They were based on compromise. You weren't loved for your truth. You were tolerated for your performance. And now that you've removed the performance, some people vanish. Some distance themselves. Some erupt with anger you never expected. But their reactions aren't about you. They're about the role you no longer play. They're about the version of themselves they can no longer maintain with you in the picture. Because for many people, it's not your absence that hurts. It's what your absence reveals. When you stop explaining, you strip others of their illusions. You force them to see what they refuse to confront. You were never a side character in their drama. You were the glue, the mirror, the silence between their sentences. You were the one who absorbed the weight of their unhealed selves so they could pretend to be okay. And when you walk away without a monologue, they're left with the rawness of their own chaos. It's not that they needed you. They needed what you were willing to hold. And when you stop holding it, the walls begin to crumble. This is why walking away silently is often mistaken for cruelty. Because those who were fed by your sacrifice now feel hunger. Not because you took anything from them, but because you stopped bleeding for their comfort. And here lies the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want your truth. They want your compliance. They want your presence on their terms. They want your loyalty without boundaries. They want your energy without cost. So when you step into alignment with yourself, when you stop offering detailed maps to those committed to misunderstanding you, you don't just upset the dynamic, you obliterate it. You become a wildfire, not chaotic, but cleansing, not cruel, but unapologetically real. And not everyone can withstand the heat of your truth. Let's talk about fear. Not yours, but theirs. What are people really afraid of when you stop explaining? It's not your silence. It's not even your departure. It's the realization that you were never theirs to begin with, that you were always your own person, just temporarily edited to make them feel secure. When you reclaim yourself, it disrupts everything, because now they must confront the reality that love was conditional, that loyalty was transactional, that what they called connection was actually a coping mechanism. Your growth becomes a threat, not because you did something wrong, but because they've stayed the same. They look at you and see what they've avoided. Evolution, accountability, healing. You become a living mirror of what's possible beyond their comfort zone. And for those unwilling to grow, that's intolerable. So they do what many do when faced with truth. They attack, they rewrite, they gaslight, they diminish. They say you're too much now. They say you've changed. They say you've become hard to be around. But what's actually hard is facing someone who no longer fears being misunderstood. Because in a world addicted to surface-level validation, authenticity is rebellion. And you stopped explaining because you started living. When the need to explain dies, something ancient awakens. Your inner authority. The part of you that no longer looks outward for confirmation. The part of you that doesn't need applause to trust your steps. The part of you that remembers. You are never meant to be decoded like a puzzle. You are meant to be felt like a thunderstorm. You begin to speak differently, slower, clearer, fewer words, but more meaning. You no longer rush to fill silences. You let people sit with the truth. You no longer dilute your boundaries. You let others feel the weight of your absence when they can't meet your presence. And you no longer chase closure, because you realize that peace isn't found in the last conversation. It's found in the first decision to choose yourself. You become the person who can walk away, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about your soul to stay in spaces that require its abandonment. And this power, it cannot be taught. It must be lived. You stop trying to make people get it. You start surrounding yourself with people who already do. You no longer argue with projections. You invest in resonance. And most of all, you understand. Not everyone deserves access to the unfiltered you. So now let's come full circle. What happens when you stop explaining? You become free, but not in the loud, performative way freedom is often sold. In a quieter, more sacred way. In the kind of freedom that lives in your chest and breathes slower now. In the kind that lets you wake up and not brace for impact. In the kind that lets you walk into a room and not shrink. In the kind that lets you say no and not second-guess it. You become grounded, rooted, unshakable. And the irony? That's when the right people finally hear you. Because your silence, it's not empty. It's full of truth, and only those who've done the work, who've met themselves in the dark, will understand it. They won't need your essays. They won't need your backstory. They'll feel you, and they'll meet you where you are. No explanations required. So if you're there, standing on the edge of no longer performing, no longer clarifying, no longer apologizing for your path, let go. Let them misunderstand you. Let them whisper. Let them project. Let them rewrite. Because your peace is louder than any version of you they try to create. Stop explaining. Start becoming. And watch how the entire universe realigns around your truth.